WordPress Accessibility Day 2023, Accessibility Beyond Blindness, with speaker Allie Nimmons, owner, Media Productions. This presentation was recorded September 27th, 2023.
Welcome to WordPress Accessibility Day 2023. My name is Amanda Roper. I'm joining you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm the Accessibility Program Manager at T. Rowe Price, where I'm responsible for developing and maintaining the accessibility program across local teams. When I'm not solving for accessibility issues in the world, you can find me screen printing, hiking, or in an art museum with one of my many vintage cameras at my side. And I'm so excited to be introducing you to this talk today, Accessibility Beyond Blindness with Allie Nimmons. A little bit about Allie. In 2014, after dropping out of theater school, Allie started teaching herself how to code. She got her first internship in 2015, where she was introduced to WordPress. She spoke at her first WordPress camp, WordCamp Miami, in 2017. And between 2016 to 2019, she built websites and provided WordPress support independently under the name Pixel Glow Web Design. She has spent time providing plugin support at GiveWP, being a speaker ambassador for GoDaddy Pro, leading the community team at WP Bus, and producing digital content for Master WP. She currently owns Media Productions, LLC, where she provides editing, voiceover, and production services to companies like Kinsta and WP 101. She's an instructor of WordPress Essentials course on LinkedIn Learning, and through Media, Allie uses her knowledge of WordPress to teach others how to use it. Now, please feel free to add your questions in the Zoom Q&A section, and we'll answer them all at the end of the session. Use the chat to connect with other attendees, and Allie, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Amanda. Wow, I forgot that I provided my long bio for this. Thank you for that amazing introduction. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be speaking with y'all. Accessibility Beyond Blindness. On screen here, bit.ly/ABBWPA is actually a link to these slides if you'd like to follow along with me. If that's easier for you, the access to those slides are right there. And I'll be providing some links later on in the talk as well. And the links are going to be in those slides. So if that's helpful for you, please go ahead and jump in. Also, I'm including the hashtags for the event on every slide. Please use those hashtags on whatever social media you might be on, and post about this event. Thank the organizers. This is such a fantastic event, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. If there's any takeaways that you grab from this talk, please share. If there's any slides that you want to screenshot and share, please go ahead and do that as well. I absolutely do not mind. I'm not huge on social media at the moment, so you don't need to tag me or anything, but make sure to tag the event. There we go. I currently teach about WordPress. That is what I spend the majority of my time doing. And I provide tools and resources to try to help the tech space be more diverse. I started building websites in 2015, like was previously said. And in that time, I pretty definitely launched more inaccessible websites than accessible websites. I can say for pretty certain that the first few years of my education as a web designer and developer, I was not keeping accessibility in mind. It wasn't something that I was really aware of or that was on my radar. But as I've learned and as I've built and developed and launched and broken and troubleshot and migrated and maintained so many different WordPress sites, it's something that I've learned so much more about through osmosis or on my own independently. And it's something that's become really important to me because the more websites I see and the more I learn that those websites tend not to be accessible. And so the education about accessibility is something that I've become passionate about, and supporting people like the people who run this event who spend most of their time educating people about accessibility, I believe is incredibly important. That being said, I'm not an expert in accessibility. I'm very self-taught. I have no formal training. I don't consult about accessibility. I don't have an agency that focuses on accessibility. So I will probably get a few things wrong. I really hope not. I'm going to try my best. I'm always just doing my best. But that also means that I welcome any and all corrections. If I make any mistakes, please let me know so that I can know better, so that I can do better, and so I can educate others better. I think it's kismet that my name is Allie, which is so close to ally. I am a huge proponent of allyship, particularly in tech. If you've met me before, interacted with me before, that is kind of my brand. And I try to be as intersectional about that as I possibly can, which means that my allyship includes anyone who can use it. And that definitely includes the umbrella of web accessibility. I am not very active on social media, like I said, but I am pretty active on LinkedIn. You can just search my name on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect there. I know I already had an offer for a new friend on LinkedIn. And fun fact, I am actually in the LinkedIn offices in Southern California right now recording a course with them. They were kind enough to give me a break in my recording time to come be here with you. So shouts out to LinkedIn. And of course, this is a WordPress talk, so I had to put a picture of myself on my little about screen, and I just decided to flex that I met LeVar Burton recently because no other picture of me is as cool as this picture. And I did definitely try to work in Geordie LaForge into this presentation, given that he is a blind character that LeVar Burton played, but it never really fit. So after this talk, if you can think of a way that I could have incorporated Geordie LaForge into this talk, please let me know in case I do it again. All right. So who is this talk for? What are we talking about? In my experience thus far, and my education about accessibility, but also speaking to other people about accessibility, there is what I believe to be a huge misconception, and I'm sure most of you will agree with me, that the job of accessibility in terms of website application design lies in code, what that software looks like, what that code looks like, how it's written, and design, what the website looks like on the front end, the colors, the fonts, all of those sorts of things. And the misconception is that that's where that work ends. And that's completely false, right? But that is what a lot of people go through life thinking. But we wouldn't really be talking about the breadth of accessibility if we're not talking about the content on a website, if that content that is being written, whether it is written or whether it's visual, if that content is accessible to everyone who's using that site. If you are somebody who works in social media, accessibility needs to be a part of your process. If you are somebody who works in marketing, who strategizes, accessibility needs to be part of that process. Even things like speed and security have a lot of overlap in terms of prioritizing, making sure that this site is accessible. HR, like if you work at all on a website, accessibility is your responsibility. I won't be talking a lot about event accessibility in this presentation, even though WordPress event accessibility is an enormous issue and it's very important and it needs a lot of work. I wanted to keep this focused specifically to websites, but tons of this information is going to overlap. So if you are anyone who works on a website, if you have a website, if you manage a website, if you add content to a website, if you maintain a website, if you optimize websites, there's a lot in here for you. So I believe that our idea, our perception of accessibility is also limited in terms of who it is that we are making a website accessible for. Especially if you are new to the realm of accessibility, your preconceived notions about who you're solving problems for might be very limited. And that might not be your fault because the representation that we do see in terms of accessibility tends to include people with physical disabilities. So what you're seeing on screen right now are the first 7 image results when I searched on a particular stock website accessibility. And all of these images feature people in wheelchairs. They feature people who are blind or who are using assistive technology. And it's not just people in wheelchairs or people who are blind that need accessible websites, right? But that is sort of the story that's being told in a lot of the content that we see online when we're learning about accessibility. And so when we discuss accessibility solutions, when we have this preconceived notion, we've already decided what the problems are, right? Before you build anything, no matter what it is that you're building, whether it's something virtual or something physical, you have to know what the problems are that you're trying to solve. And I think all of us can identify with that. Chances are within your job, you are a problem solver. Isn't that what we do when we develop software? When we engineer something, when we market to people, we're trying to solve a problem. We already know how to do this. We are already familiar with the identify the problem and find the methods to solve the problem. When it comes to website accessibility, I believe that we just sort of have to expand that scope in order to find the appropriate methods to solve the right problems for the right people. So, who does accessibility benefit? The short answer is accessibility benefits everybody, right? The whole point of this, accessibility beyond blindness, is accessibility doesn't just benefit blind or low vision people who are accessing your website, which is kind of what that conception tends to be. And when I'm speaking about disabilities in this talk, I'm talking about both permanent and temporary disabilities. And in this case, a disability is something that makes it harder for you to achieve a goal the way a person without that disability would achieve that goal. So for example, if I'm on a website and there's a button that's supposed to go to another page and I click on that button and it doesn't work, it just is broken, that is a problem that affects everyone. It doesn't matter what disability I may have or not have. It doesn't matter my access. It doesn't matter my education. It's broken. That affects everyone in the same way. Whereas if that button has really unclear anchor text that just says, click here for more. Perhaps somebody who is neurotypical might be able to put various pieces of that page together and figure out where that button goes and feel confident in being able to click that button to get to the next step. There are people who will really struggle with that and not feel confident in clicking that button to understand where it goes. So now we've created a rift in terms of what some people are struggling with and what some people aren't. We've solved one problem and we haven't solved another problem. So lots of people benefit from accessibility, right? And this is definitely not a comprehensive list. I'm sure there's examples that I am missing, but these are people that in my experience, tend to kind of get overlooked when we are strategizing about accessibility. Neurodivergent people benefit from accessibility. And when I'm talking about neurodivergence, if you don't know what that term means, being neurodivergent means having a brain that works differently from the average or neurotypical person. This might be differences in social preferences. This might be ways of learning. This might be ways of communicating, and it might be ways of perceiving your environment. So examples of neurodivergent, again, not a comprehensive list, could be people with attention deficit disorders, ADHD, people with severe anxiety, people with epilepsy. Epilepsy is considered a neurodivergence. People who are autistic on the spectrum, as you might say. Anyone with a mental disability, a cognitive impairment, or a mental illness that is strong enough, that affects that person enough to affect their use of a website. These are all people that we need to be thinking about. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not an expert in ADHD. I'm not an expert in autism. How am I supposed to anticipate those needs? It doesn't take a lot to do some research into how experiences can be challenging online for people with neurodivergence. And a lot of it comes down to clarity and choice. So content that is hard or impossible to ingest, user journeys that are stressful, flashing or automatic movement that can't be paused or interacted with, All of these things can affect people with neurodivergence and make using a website very difficult. And there is a challenge in that if you are a neurotypical person, I have an unconscious bias. I will make assumptions, you will make assumptions as I create a website, as you create a website, that you will be understood, that you will make decisions about communicating information in ways that you understand. And there are many people out there who don't follow that same thought process. And so taking the time to understand that and taking the time to make sure that information is as clear and concise as possible is incredibly important. And we'll go over a little bit later some ways in which we can do that. Accessibility also benefits people with learning disabilities. A very common example of that is dyslexia, which makes it hard for you to read. People with dyslexia often find that words move around or letters move around or words might appear backwards and so on and so forth. And a lot of fonts can make dyslexia worse, can make it harder for someone with dyslexia to read something. And so if you are publishing content on the internet, it doesn't take a lot to research what fonts are stronger choices for people with dyslexia. When we're talking about learning disabilities, we might also be talking about simply people for whom language is not their first, or English is not their first language. And that's not to say that that person can't understand English, but there might be language on your website that is so localized to English, to America or parts of Europe, that maybe somebody coming from Japan or somebody coming from Portugal is not going to understand. And we'll go over some of those idioms later. But just keeping in mind that we want to create this shortest point of contact between what somebody has to do and how they can reach their goal, right? And so providing as few steps as possible on our websites, and that includes making it so that they can read the information and understand it clearly. All of that is incredibly important. So these are all kind of, these are sort of what I consider internal factors. These are things about a person, about their being, that might make it challenging for them to access your website. Some external factors. People with poor internet connections, and that doesn't just mean people that are in impoverished areas who don't have access to high-speed internet. That could mean that your user is at a university library and it's finals week and everyone is hogging the Wi-Fi. It could mean that they're at a coffee shop and that coffee shop just has cheap Wi-Fi and isn't able to load your website as quickly as you, a website builder or business owner who pays extra for high-speed Wi-Fi, might experience. And when sites are slow to load, they tend to load minimal content. And so this is where site speed comes into effect when we're talking about accessibility. A good example of that being alternative text, right? So if your user has a poor internet connection, the images on your site may not load or may not load as quickly. And if you have strong alternative text on that page, they don't need to worry about the information they might be missing when they can't see that image. We're also talking about mobile device users, and that's not necessarily just to say we need to talk about responsivity. We need to talk about people who are using older devices. My dad just got rid of his flip phone like a year and a half ago, and that man was trying to access the internet on his flip phone. So please think about my dad. Please think about people who are using older devices that are not iPhones or Android phones. Sometimes people just don't have access to those devices. And so we need to keep those people in mind when we're looking at how simple can we make it to access this website. We're looking at people who have limited mobility, and that could be a permanent limitation, a missing arm, a missing hand, a missing finger that makes it really hard to use a keyboard or use a mouse to interact with your site. They may have arthritis and not really be able to scroll through a website as much as we think they should be able to. I'm trying to get you thinking about the wide variety of people and circumstances outside of what we normally consider. When we know the problem, we can anticipate a solution, right? I mean, even when I think about limited mobility, have you ever tried to like navigate a website while holding like a screaming, crying, wiggling baby? Like there are so many times in your life where your ability to navigate something is challenged or taken away from you, and that can be temporary or that can be permanent. I'm going to take a sip of water. So this last bullet point, just hear me out. Recently, I was in a grocery store and I already had a cart full of heavy things, and it was the end of the day and I was tired and I didn't want to be there, and I don't like going to the grocery store, but I was there anyway. And I was on my phone and I was looking at a website for a recipe that I wanted to make, and I was trying to find the list of ingredients. If you've ever tried to access a recipe, like go on Pinterest and find a recipe and click through and go to that person's blog, you know the challenges that tend to come with those pages. I was forced to scroll all the way down to the bottom of this enormous blog post in order to actually find the recipe itself, because this person wanted to tell me a story about their grandmother, or I don't know, something completely irrelevant to what I needed. So I'm trying to scroll, and the page is packed with ads, banner ads, inline ads, pop-up ads. And so every time I try to scroll, I'm accidentally tapping on ads. And the second an ad opens, I have to try to find the little X to close out of that ad. And usually they make them incredibly, incredibly tiny. And so I'm trying to angle my hand to get the right pressure to get the tiny X. And usually I don't. So I end up actually tapping on the ad itself. And now I need to go all the way to the top left corner of my phone to try to go back. So I'm stressed out. Okay. There are so many ads and they won't stop. And I'm scrolling and scrolling. I finally get to a video and I think, great, they made a video about this recipe. I'll just open up the video. There are no captions on the video. And I'm sorry, I'm not the kind of person that will play the audio of a video in the middle of a Target. That's just, I can't do that. So the video would have been great to just see what she was using and go ahead and grab it. But there were no captions to this video, so I had to go back. I finally get to the recipe, but the connection, the Wi-Fi connection in this Target is middling. And so the ads are still populating. The ads from higher up on the page are still loading. So I get to the recipe list and then it shoots down because an ad has populated and forced the content down the page. I didn't make the dang recipe. I never made it, right? I gave up because it was so impossible for me, an able-bodied, neurotypical person with no necessarily like challenges to my mobility, no learning disabilities, no disability, to use this website. And these are the kinds of things that we have to keep in mind, right? That yes, we are designing websites, we are building websites, we are creating solutions, and we are keeping people with disabilities in mind, but that's not where the work ends. There are so many things that this particular website could have done to improve my experience. Lots of recipe sites will now have a jump to recipe button at the very top, which you just tap and it brings you all the way down to the recipe. That's great. I don't really understand why you can't just put the recipe at the top of the page above the fold. Why do I have an extra step in my user journey? And then when I do click that button, those ads are still populating. So I get to the recipe and then I'm forced away from it, right? It's incredibly stressful. And these are the things that we have to be thinking about that person at 6:30 at Target who's just trying to figure out if they need celery or not, right? So we talked a lot about people, the people beyond blind folks and people in wheelchairs that we want to think about when we are optimizing for accessibility. If you want to take all the altruism out of it, and get to the business side of things, right? Like how does focusing more on accessibility help my website, help my traffic, help my sales, help my business? SEO and accessibility, in my mind, are like in love with each other. They're a couple. They adore each other. There is so much overlap when it comes to accessibility and SEO best practices because the goal is the same. The goal is to make sure that as many people as humanly possible can easily use your website. Accessibility helps search engine algorithms understand your content better, and it helps to improve searchability, right? Accessible websites are just easier to use sites, and Google loves to rank sites that are easy to use, and sites that communicate that your site is the best answer to someone's problem. And you could have like the best product in the whole world to sell someone, but if that site is inaccessible and doesn't communicate that information to everyone, how is Google supposed to know that? The more accessible your site, the more it checks all of Google's boxes, right? If the site is easy to read and uses headings and subheadings and bullet points, if the images have clear and fantastic alternative text, if the navigation is awesome and easy to use, if it's mobile responsive, if it loads quickly, if it has high traffic and low bounces because people aren't abandoning your site in the middle of a target, all of these things are going to help Google help you. So even if we want to take the people out of it and just go after, well, what do the robots think? The robots want your site to be accessible, okay? This goes the same for other engines and algorithms, not just Google, right? Videos with captions, as I just complained about, are so much better. They perform better on social media than ones without, right? That's kind of a definitive thing of TikTok videos now, is they have that text that is like populating as the person is speaking. Why? Because people like them. They watch them. They share them. They find them valuable. And so the algorithms will see this and then add value to that video and say, okay, I'm going to push this video to more people because it's accessible to them and they're going to be able to enjoy it. Hear me out. I know this image is a complete non sequitur, but I have a point, okay? And I'm stealing this point from my friend Michelle because she's talked about it on our podcast before, and I think it's extremely pertinent. In the 90s, there was a fantastic show called Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, and it was about a group of gay men it was a reality show, and these gay men would find a straight guy and like give him a whole like life makeover, like new clothes and like all of this kind of stuff. And it was very wholesome and it was very sweet and it was very groundbreaking in terms of asking for tolerance for the gay community, right? Like showing gay people on TV, helping other people, right? And the whole goal was tolerance in a time when the queer community was not tolerated. And the show has recently got a reboot. It's fantastic. It's called Queer Eye. That's the 5 people you're looking at right now. They're the hosts. I love this show. And their goal is acceptance, not tolerance, but accepted. Because would you rather be tolerated in a space or would you rather be accepted? Would you rather feel that people just aren't complaining about you? Or would you rather feel that people want you there? Right? So much of accessibility is about inclusion. And inclusion is about making people feel like you want them to be there. Why would you not want people to feel like they belong on your website? Why would you not want people to feel like going to your website, it's like it was made for them, right? You want them to be reading your content. You want them to be buying your products or signing up for your services. That's what all this is about, right? We design websites because we want people to use them and do things with them. And so, web accessibility works I stole this quote from UNC Greensboro. I'll say that. Web accessibility works to inclusively enable access to a website by all users, regardless of the user's level of ability, condition, or circumstances. And I love that definition has the word inclusive in it. I really disagree with the idea that, and I've heard people say this, I've heard people in the WordPress community say this, that accessibility is an extra, right? It's an additional. It's, you know, another service, just another service to add on to a project. That it is pandering to disabled people, that it's going the extra mile. It's not extra. It needs to be default, right? Or else you are intentionally being exclusive. Inclusivity means intersectionality, right? What, like I mentioned earlier, which means everything, all, everybody. Everybody is considered, not just who we like to think of when we think of disabled people, and not just, you know, the best practices to make sure that a screen reader can access the site. We need to be thinking about everybody who is accessing the site in all different sorts of ways, right? So that's a lot of Allie's feelings, right? I'd like us to kind of do a little activity, kind of an audit. So I would like to challenge you to right now open up a screen on your phone, on your computer, um, and open up your website. It can be your personal website, your blog, your business website. It could be a website you're working on building right now, a website you've built for somebody else in the past. Just pick one. Pick one that you like and that you're proud of. And we're going to check some things together. And the goal of this activity is not to shame you. It's not to say, look at all the things you didn't do. It's not to say, look how inaccessible your site is, boo-hoo to you, right? Because I'm sure my website would fail this test. And as I was writing it, I was like, I should really go rehaul my website. This is not a comprehensive list of things that your site should do or have or whatever. And it does not include every single best practice, but I try to focus on the ones that I feel like people miss out on a lot, ones that I forget about a lot. So I would love for you to have your site open with me, and we'll go through these items together. And I'll make sure that y'all have the link again to the slides in case you want to keep this list. There's this slide and there's another slide. So we have two lists to go through together. And I just want you to click through, and I want you to try to make note of anything that you've missed, anything that you haven't done. And I would love for you to carry with you after this event is over the action of going through and addressing these issues, right? Because we can sit here all day and talk about how great accessibility is and how much we support it and love it and blah, blah, blah. We need to then take action about it, right? So if you have your site open already, let's go over these items. Did you, before you launched your site, test your site on a lower bandwidth than the Wi-Fi connection you have now? Okay, I need to phrase these in a different way. Do you need to, right? That's what the subheading says that. Do you need to test your site that way? Do you need to add any missing alt text or any alt text that is not using inclusive language? Do you need to break up chunks of content that's going to cause someone to scroll and scroll and scroll forever? Do you need to adjust colors? Do you need to adjust colors that are too low on contrast? And do you need to adjust colors that are using too high of a contrast? Because neon yellow on black is fantastic for not being too low on the contrast scale, right? But it's way too high. Do you need to change any images or icons that represent an idea all alone by themselves, right? Images and icons always need to complement whatever the more long form content is on that site. Do you have any videos that you need to add captions to? Do you need to remove things that move on their own or change automatically without the user's input? Do you need to address any unclear or sparse error messaging? So that means if something fails, if somebody is trying to fill out a form and it doesn't work, do you have the proper language to tell them what to do without making an assumption that they'll just know, oh, I should go back and start over, right? So I actually want to give you a minute, just for this page, I'll give you a minute to comb through your site and, you know, make notes for yourself of which of these tasks you might still need to do. And then we're going to have another one after this one where we'll do the same thing. And then we'll wrap up. I'm going to actually, I know we're doing a Q&A after. I'm curious to look at the Q&A now, though. I'm going to actually look at the chat then. I'm scared. I'm honestly scared to look at the chat because I'm scared everyone's going to be like, "You're wrong. This is all dumb." I know you guys won't do that to me. I know y'all won't do that to me. Wow, so many. I'm really trying to go back in the chat, and there's been so much chat activity. I'm obsessed. That's the one thing I miss about in-person events is immediate feedback. We're talking about semantic HTML. I love that. Someone said yes, mom of three. Yeah, I don't really know how you can navigate a Pinterest recipe website with three babies vying for your attention. I'm talking about a lot of certifications. It's really interesting. I'm glad you like the who benefits list. Normalize getting rid of life stories with recipes. Y'all are fun. Blame SEO for that. Yes, I know exactly why they do it. And the thing is, it works because I find them all the time, but it's really awful. And so many ads. How much money do they make through those ads? Like, really? All right, I think we're about to start a coalition against recipe blogs. Everyone is so angry about them. I love it. Oh, someone's talking about how they broke their arm. Yeah, really opened your eyes to, yeah, the challenges that people have to go through. And yes, please do not use auto captions. I have so many feelings and thoughts about that. Faye, I am covered in dog hair, so I identify with you. I don't use Instacart. I use something called Shipt, which is basically the same thing. But that day I had to just go to the store because it was late. Okay, I think we've done this list. If you have if you want to screenshot this, you totally can, or we can add the link to the slides again. And then we have this next list to go through together as well. Oh, I am low on time, it looks like. Do I need to stop and answer questions instead?
You have a couple more minutes if you want to finish up.
Okay, a couple more minutes. So please screenshot this list. We'll go over it really quickly together. I won't give you the couple of minutes though, because I want to make sure to reach the last slide here before I do questions. Okay, do you need to change colors to communicate ideas in stronger ways, right? Green means go, red means stop. You got to make sure we're using colors to communicate. If we're using a color, try not to make it arbitrary. Do you need to add subheadings to your content? Probably yes. Do you need to rewrite unclear anchor text? Click here is not acceptable. We need better anchor text. I meant to do more research on those. Do we need to add options for people to be able to go back in their processes? That could be breadcrumbs. That's a great example of that. Progress bars, things like that. You shouldn't have to rely purely on I need to close the chat. You shouldn't have to rely purely on your browser back button in order to go back in your user journey. Do you need to test for thumb first mobile design when you're using your site on a website? How easy is it for your thumb to, work that site? Do you need to condense steps from your user journeys? Is it taking your user 12 different decisions to get to where they have to go, whereas it could take 8 or 6 or 3, right? Do you need to research more helpful fonts? There are lists out there of fonts that are specifically just better for people with learning disabilities. And do you need to go through your content to remove localized idioms or phrases like, hit it out of the park, right? Somebody in a different country doesn't know what baseball is, they don't know what you're talking about. And do you need to remove gendered language? We could have a whole other discussion about gendered language and inclusivity and accessibility and how those things are combined, but I will not. We're going to move on to the final slide, which are some resources for y'all. If you use Yoast SEO, they have a fantastic feature in their plugin that helps you check for inclusive language on your website. If you need help approximating different screen sizes, browserstack.com fantastic website. I'm sure there are others. If there are, please put please put them in the chat. If you go to a website and you're like, wow, this website is fantastic, it is accessible, it checks all the boxes, it does all the things that I want to do, snoop on it, go to builtwith.com, put the URL in there, and it'll tell you all the different tools and software that that site uses. I have a blog post where I list a bunch of diverse stock photography sites, so you can make sure that your imagery is inclusive. Hemingway is a fantastic browser app that helps you to make sure that your content is as easy to read as possible. It even has a feature that tells you what the reading level, like the grade level is of your writing. So if you're writing at too high a level, you can lower it a little bit to just make sure that more people understand what you're talking about. And finally, I have been looking for a plugin, a WordPress plugin, that can help with keyboard accessibility. Because I had a site recently that I realized I couldn't tab through, and I don't know enough about code to form a solution to that myself, and I was trying to find a plugin and I couldn't. So I would love it if any of y'all have any suggestions in that regard. We're done. Let's go to the Q&A.
All right. Thanks, Allie, for your talk. Your examples were super relatable to a lot of people in the chat. And
I'm glad.
Yeah, it was awesome. And just a friendly reminder for folks who haven't entered in your Q&A, you can put those in the Q&A section in the chat. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the first question from Anonymous. What is your advice for alt attributes and use of keywords in the descriptive text?
My advice for alt text is to pretend like you're sitting next to your blind grandmother and you're describing pictures of her hometown from when she was small to her. Like, be descriptive, be specific. As far as keywords are concerned, if the content on your site is intentionally chosen, you won't have to worry about making sure that you have keywords in your alt text. Google is smart enough to make the associations that if you have a website for your bakery and you never say bakery in your alt text, but you say muffins and cakes and cookies, like it'll understand what you're talking about, right? So I would say don't worry necessarily too much about keywords, but make your descriptive text and your alt text relevant and detailed enough that the connections can be made.
Great. Next question is there a specific contrast ratio for too high in quotations?
I'm pretty certain there is. I don't know off the top of my head, but there are lots of tools online like testers and websites where you can, what's the one that I use? Where you can input like 2 different hex values and it'll tell you if your yellow text is on top of your pink background, the ratio is too high or too low. If that's incorrect, someone please correct me. I know that it'll definitely say when it is too low. I now can't remember if it'll say if it's too high, but my advice would be to look at a couple of those like testers and see what it tells you.
So I saw a few. I saw WebAIM, Pascal Group dropped in the chat.
WebAIM is the one that I like. I just can't remember if it also says that if the contrast is too high. I know that it says if it's too low.
No too high.
Oh, interesting. Well then, I guess just use your common sense. I don't know. I just know that I've definitely looked at things where I'm like, that's too bright, right? Like that neon color that you're using is too bright and it is upsetting to my eyes. So that might just be a matter of like showing it to people and asking them, what they think. But yeah, I guess then the answer is no, there isn't a specific ratio for too high.
Okay, all right. I'm just going to roll on into the next question because there are a lot of questions here. So there's a clarification question there's a bullet point that said change images or icons that represent an idea alone. Are you able to clarify that a bit more?
Yeah. So let's think of a good example. If you have, shoot, I'm struggling to think of an example at the moment. Um, okay, one good example. Say you offer two services. You offer coding services and you offer design services. And you have a landing page where somebody can read about the services and then click on one of two buttons to either go learn more about your coding services or learn more about your design services. If your coding services button, instead of saying learn more about my coding services, if it has like a bracket or some other symbol that represents code, and that's what you're using to communicate that that's what this button is for, that is not a strong choice because I'm not an expert in autism, but my understanding is that many people who are neurodivergent or on that spectrum have a hard time connecting a symbol to a meaning for that symbol, right? So you're just creating uncertainty, you're creating a little bit of confusion, whereas it's so much easier for you to just say what that button is for. If you want to have that symbol near the button or after the description, like that's great, that's fine, that's adorable. But using a symbol alone to communicate a concept, especially a choice, is not a strong idea because you are isolating people who struggle to understand what that means.
Excellent example. That was so thank you, Allie. Next question. There's another in the do you need to, there's a part about remove things that move or change automatically. Does this include micro animations, hover effects? Leah would love to learn more about how these slight movements aren't accessible to as many clients.
Yeah. I would love for somebody who really, whose profession is accessibility to chime in here as well. Because I've heard kind of some dissenting opinions. Um, to me, as somebody who does have anxiety and who does end up in the middle of Target not knowing what to do, if things are moving, if I'm trying to find where I'm trying to go on your website, if I'm trying to start my user journey or find the next step in my user journey, excuse me, if things are moving and distracting my attention, I'm distracted, right? And that's not what you want. Um, I think something like a hover animation is fine because I'm already focused, my attention is already focused there. So if I touch something and it moves, that's almost kind of an expected behavior. So that's not really going to bother me as much. But if I'm reading some really intense content or I'm looking through a list of things and this other thing is hovering or moving or shaking, that's bothering me, that's distracting me. And so I would omit it as a designer. I would omit any movement that is not directly helping the user accomplish what they're trying to do. um, I'm more than open though to people in the chat arguing back against that, because I'm sure there are things I'm not thinking about there, but that's my reasoning for minimizing movement as much as possible, especially if it's movement that cannot be stopped and cannot be paused or cannot be, controlled in that way.
Thanks, Allie. There's a lot of great recommendations and people talking about it in the chat. So that might be something to follow up on afterwards. I probably have time for one more question. There's a question from Susan is scrolling content the same as a long page? How would you break it up? I try and add headings, and if more than 3 or 4, I add a table of contents. Are those valid solutions?
A table of contents is always going to be a valid solution. I think so. When you're saying long page, from what I understand, that's like one of those pages that's a lot of content, and you might be able to like use an ID to jump to different sections. I think that's what you're talking about.
I'm thinking like a recipe page, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Always table of contents. Like I love blog posts. I think Kinsta, their blog, does that really well. Like they always have a table of contents at the beginning that go to all of the like subheadings. I just think everyone should do that no matter what. If you have subheadings on that page and it makes sense. Um, so yes, to answer your question, those are very valid solutions. Yes. And I guess if we're out of time, I can type answer the rest of those Q&A questions if that's cool.
I think that'd be super appreciated. There's so many great
Yeah.
questions here. Your talk just sparked a lot of ideas and interest, Allie. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this session with Allie Nimmons. You can continue the conversation. Yeah, you can continue the conversation in the chat or on social media using the hashtag WPA11Y day and WPAD 2023. We also appreciate it if you go to 2023.wpaccessibility.day/feedback to provide anonymous feedback for our speakers on their presentation. And you can also enter to win a t-shirt while you're there. And signing off, but stay tuned for the next talk. Is my WordPress site accessible? How to perform accessibility and usability tests with Gabby Gandika at 17 o'clock UTC. And while you're waiting, don't forget to visit our sponsors pages to grab some virtual swag and enter for a chance to win some prizes. See you after the break.
Thank you to WordPress Accessibility Day 2023 sponsors. Platinum sponsor, Equalize Digital. Equalize Digital's Accessibility Checker plugin is an automated accessibility scanning tool that helps WordPress websites become and stay accessible. Platinum sponsor, Gravity Forms. Gravity Forms is the professional form builder that you need to create beautiful, powerful, and accessible forms. Gold sponsors, 20i, DQ, Empire Caption Solutions, Pressable, and WP Engine. Silver sponsors, Code Geek, Drake Cooper, GoDaddy, Lone Rock Point, NerdPress, Overnight Website by Kinetic Iris, Riola Networks, A11Y Collective, and The Blogsmith. Bronze sponsors, Accessicart, Green Geeks Web Hosting, Hall Analysis SEO Consulting, HDC, ITX, IvyCat, MetaBox, Pixel Chefs, Simply Schedule Appointments, SiteGround, Termageddon, Underrepresented in Tech, Weglot, and Yoast.